cure? Will they find a cure in time for the election? That's questionable. Will they find a cure in time to before we have herd immunity? I'd say I'm a little bit more hopeful for that, but I don't know that it'll necessarily have an impact on the election, other than the fact that people maybe will look and say, okay, he's doing what he can.
Yeah, though polls, I mean, I know how you all feel about polls, okay? But polls do have Biden up on the coronavirus. For what reason? Why do you think that Joe Biden would handle this any better than Trump had?
Especially when you go back and look at the previous
H1N1.
Yeah. That was a disaster.
They were miserable.
That is a disaster. Anyway, so Air Force One lands today, and the president is probably as we speak. I don't know if they've lifted off to head back to Washington. It's supposed to be a quick visit, but to talk about the president's visit and to talk about the coronavirus and how the government is approaching this, you might remember the name of Dr. Ronny Jackson. He was the physician who took care of 3 presidents, and including Donald Trump. If you remember, was it back in January of 2018, Dr. Ronny Jackson took a lot of heat because he merely said President Trump has good genes, he is doing exceedingly well, and he has excellent cardiac health. But the main thing that everybody got upset about was he also said he did really well on the cognitive test. And all the mainstream media said, how could he have possibly done well on the cognitive test?
And would Joe Biden pass the cognitive test? Doubtful.
Here to talk all about it from Texas is Dr. Ronny Jackson. Dr. Jackson, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to talk to you guys.
So let's talk first about the coronavirus, because that's what's in the news. That's why the president was in North Carolina today. Hopefully we'll see a vaccine come up. But obviously, you're a renowned physician. We hope so, because you had 3 presidents' lives in your hands.
How did you get that job? I mean, that's a pretty big title right there.
So, well, you can answer Sadie's question first, then we'll get on with the coronavirus.
No, I think, a lot of it was, kind of being in the right place at the right time. I started out at the White House in 2006. I was the new junior physician for President George W. Bush. And, they had, at the time, 2 Army, 2 Navy, and 2 Air Force docs there. They decided that they needed an emergency medicine physician because they didn't have an ER doc there. And the Navy guy was the next one rolling out. And so my detailer, the guy that kind of controls my assignments, threw my name in the hat, nominated me, and I interviewed with a whole bunch of other folks, and I ended up getting the job. And I was only supposed to be there 3 years, but I did a decent job, and I ended up running the White House medical unit for years. And every time I came up for a new set of orders, they just extended me at the White House and kind of gave me a new leadership role. And I kind of moved from being the deputy director of the White House medical unit to the director of the White House medical unit to the physician to the White House, physician to the president, assistant to the president, senior advisor. And I ended up staying. I spent the last 14 years of my active duty career at the White House as a White House physician, including the last 3 years as President Trump's senior advisor and chief medical advisor.
Now, what's interesting is that is impressive. You started out with President George W. Bush, I believe, and then you were there for the entire time that Obama was president. Then you were there for a couple of years under Trump. Is that right?
That's right. I was there the first 3 years of the Trump administration. I just left on December 1st of last year. Yeah.
I mean, this is sort of a sidebar question, and then we'll get back to COVID. But were there any really, and maybe you can't answer this, maybe you've got and I don't want to get you saying anything that you shouldn't say, but was there any stark differences between the 3 presidents that just really stand out in your mind?
Well, yeah, they all have different personalities, obviously, and the biggest difference probably personality-wise was between President Obama and President Trump. And, I love, actually, they all 3 treated me well, and I enjoyed working at the White House the entire time I was there. But obviously, the old mantra, a lot of folks used to say, no drama Obama, because, President Obama just didn't get, visibly spun up about much, and he was pretty much even keel. Not a lot of real highs or real lows. Just kind of, whereas, President Trump is, I love working for him because I'm an emergency medicine doc, and what I like about emergency medicine is you never know what's coming through the door, and that's what I love about President Trump is it's exciting working in the Trump White House. You never know when you get up in the morning, what's going to be the story of the day, but it's fun. But they have vastly different personalities, of course. But,
and by the way, I don't know if you have mentioned, you are now running for Congress down in the 13th
right.
Congressional District of Texas, which is, for our folks, is up in the Panhandle. Wichita Falls and Amarillo is part of that territory. A large geographic. I mean, you're the size of the congressional districts in Texas are even larger than ones in North Carolina, and they're pretty big.
Yeah. It's bigger than most states. It's 41 counties, 42,000 square miles.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Let's get back to the COVID-19. What is your thoughts towards how the government is handling COVID-19? And what's interesting about it's sort of a loaded question because there's obviously two diametrically opposed answers to that. You've got an authoritarian type of government on one side that says, let's shut everything down and do what we say. And on the other side, you say you have a sort of a libertarian type of government that's saying, okay, let's be careful, let's use common sense, but let's open things up. But how do you view, obviously this is something that you talk about, I'm sure you're asked about on the campaign trail, so how do you answer those questions?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that, the Trump administration's approach has been good. Initially President Trump really took kind of an aggressive approach, and he shut everything down. He shut travel from China down. He shut travel from Europe down. He shored up our southern and northern borders and really locked everything down and that was in large part because, everyone was saying, whether it's the World Health Organization or China or anybody else involved in this initially, everybody was saying this is going to be the next big pandemic that just basically wiped out half population of the earth, right? And we didn't know what the mortality was going to be. We didn't know how infectious it was going to be. We didn't know what the population, that it was going to affect. It was just going to affect everybody across the board. We had no idea. There was just a lot of unknowns. And so I think he put together a medical task force, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Briggs and Gerard and all these people that he got their advice, and he followed the advice of the medical experts early on, which was the right thing to do. But as time went on, we learned stuff about this virus. And we learned that the mortality rate, we're looking at the mortality rate now, is probably going to be less than 0.1%. I mean, it's, if you look at the huge number of people that are testing positive right now, most of them, are either asymptomatic or they just get minor symptoms, move on, and most people don't get, really sick from this. We have those populations that do, the elderly population stuff, but we learned that, that it is pretty infectious, but we also learned that it's not, the mortality rate is not near what we thought it was going to be. We were being told it was going to be 10% or more initially, but it's not. It's like 0.1%. And we learned what the vulnerable populations are. And we know now that the vulnerable populations are the extremely elderly and those that have pre-existing conditions, comorbidities that make them, susceptible to disease in general. And so as we learned more and more about this, the president's posture changed on this. And eventually, we also, we learned that our economy was being devastated by this. Shutting our economy down was devastating to all of us. So we had to recalculate the risk of keeping our economy shut down versus the risk of opening things back up with the virus. And knowing the things that we knew about and discovering what we learned about this virus, the president made an educated decision that it was time to start gradually, transitioning from the medical task force that by nature, I tell folks, I say this as a physician, but if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and if you let the medical professionals drive the train on this the entire time, they're just going to keep on assaulting that virus until it's completely eradicated, and we can't get to that point. If we work to eradicate this virus, we won't even have an economy anymore. So the president made the right call. And he eventually put together, the economic task force that he had that was focused on getting our country back up and running again, and then started, turning some of that authority over to the governors and the local authorities about, look at the situation that's specific to your state and to your local area and decide what makes sense. And I think that's a good approach, and I think that's the approach we should still have. And there's certain areas of the country where this virus is just not an issue at all, especially up in the area where I represent. There's a lot of rural areas up there that really don't have a lot of this virus out there, and they should have the the ability to get back to work and get back to school. And then if we have hot spots around the country in these urban centers, maybe we have to be a little bit more aggressive about going back to school and work or whatever. But I'm a big proponent that, coming from the part of Texas I come from, that I don't particularly want the government telling me, every single step I have to make. And I do not want the government telling me that if I'm walking down the street by myself or I'm in a car with my wife that I have to have a mask on or I'm going to get fined. So there's a line with a lot of folks, and the part of Texas that I represent leans towards some personal responsibility and and maintaining some autonomy and some good common sense and not letting the government or having the government tell us every single step we have to make. So I think the president's walking the line effectively. He's out there trying to be the leader and trying to lead by example and inspire people and encourage people to get back to work and get back to school, but to do it safely.
Well, there's a lot of people up now in North Carolina that are saying amen, Dr. Ronny Jackson. Dr. Jackson is talking with us right now. Again, President Trump was in the Research Triangle today talking about a new vaccine.
Dr. Jackson, I have a friend who lives in Amarillo, which is in your district. She's listening right now. I see her name on our Facebook live stream. So she was saying how bad the cases are in the Amarillo area. Apparently the meatpacking plants, and so they've had a high number of cases there, and people are very worried. So when you're out on the campaign trail, do you sense that, and do you sense that it's turning on Trump for that? Like the polls out today are Biden 7 points up in a lot of swing states over the coronavirus handling, and they think that Trump hasn't done a very good job of handling that. I know it's Texas, a very Republican state, although it sounds like a lot of liberals are moving there, trying to turn it blue. Yeah. But are you finding that people are just as excited about Trump, regardless of the coronavirus, or are you kind of sensing that the heat is cooling down for him?
No, the heat is cooling down for him, I think. And the reality is we had an outbreak in Amarillo related to the packing industry, just like a lot of other areas in the country did related to the packing industry. But the CDC swooped in and they made a lot of big changes, and that's really tapered off now. And although Amarillo, just like everybody else in this country right now, is having an increase in the number of diagnosed cases, that's because we're testing so aggressively. We're not having an increase in hospitalizations or deaths. That's actually continuing to decline. And I think that, I wish that we could take the politics out of this completely, but I do think that there's a big political spin on this still. Democrats in general, if they can keep this up and running, if they can keep a certain level of fear out there, their ultimate goal is that they can keep people from going back to school, which will ultimately allow them to make the argument why there should be mail-in balloting in the swing states. And I think that's the end goal here, is to get mail-in ballots universally accepted in the swing states. And I just don't think that's good for our country. I don't think it's good for our process. I don't think that it's going to inspire confidence in folks when we have elections that they were 100% legitimate. I think it's just going to open a big door for fraud in this country, for voter fraud, that I don't think we want to deal with. So I'm a big proponent of getting people back to school as quickly as we can, doing it effectively, doing it safely, but getting people back to school, getting people back to work, and obviously letting people go to the polls and vote. And I think that, unfortunately, I think that there is a little bit of a political spin on this. And the left would like you to think that, that the president is failing on this, but he's not. He's really not. And that's part of what he was doing in North Carolina today, is to get out there and to demonstrate to the public what we're actually doing, what his administration is doing to put this to bed, to defeat this virus and to get us back to work, to get us back to school. And he's effectively doing that. And I think that today showcased that.
Do you think that we will get a vaccine sooner rather than later?
I do. I think that, the medical folks that are out there that have dealt with this kind of stuff their entire career were telling us initially that there's no way that we could have a vaccine before the end of next spring. It just was impossible. But I think that what's happened is the president has gone out there and he's, in part via the Operation Warp Speed that he put together, which allowed the government to provide money to these companies to go ahead and simultaneously develop, manufacture, and deliver vaccine before they knew for sure that it was going to, that it was going to be an effective vaccine. So some of that money is going to, is going to go into processes that don't ultimately end up producing a vaccine. But there's going to be a couple of them that do, and they're going to end up finding the vaccine, and they're going to end up getting it out to folks very quickly, very expeditiously. And I think that what we're going to see is that we're probably going to have a vaccine for this virus before the end of this year. That's what I think, because the president has really opened up the private sector genius here, and allowed the private sector to really, to contribute more than they normally would to a process like this, and combined it with what's going on in the research triangle and the academic sector and the government sector. So he's brought all these sectors together with one focus and provided enough incentive and enough money from the government to really make it happen, and I think it's going to pay off.
We hear a lot of information about up here in North Carolina about how the Democrats really want to turn Texas purple. Do you see that happening?
No, that's not happening. There's a lot of talk about that right now, and I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I think that those polls that are out there right now, I think that they're wrong, and I think that they're engineered wrong. A lot of them they don't sample the proper number of Republicans. A lot of Republicans aren't even replying to polls anymore because they don't want to be identified, because of the hostility, on both sides. We have an unfortunate situation right now where no one wants to identify where they stand politically on anything because they don't want to lose friends and family members over it, things of that nature. But what I think is going to happen is I think that President Trump has a strong base that's going to go out and vote for him, and that's, he's going to need other people besides his base to get him over that finish line. But what I think is going to happen is there are a lot of folks out there that don't really care for President Trump. They don't like him, and they under normal circumstances, I think, might want to vote for somebody else. But I think what's going on the left right now is scaring people to death, and I think the alternative is going to be is just terrifying to some people. So I think those people are going to go in. They're going to go into that voting booth. They're going to pull that curtain, and they're going to tell folks that they don't like Donald Trump. And they're going to go in there and they're going to vote for Donald J. Trump because the alternative is terrifying people right now. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, and speaking about terror, I don't know if you heard the story out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A black Trump supporter, a guy named Burnell Trammell, was shot and killed execution style over the weekend. And he was and the only thing they can figure, and in fact, the Republican Party up there has asked the state attorney general to look into this murder. The only thing they can figure that he was shot and killed because he was a very, very, very outspoken supporter of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. That's the part that I think people just find terrifying right now is that things have gotten that extreme, and this complete lack of law and order that's going on in certain parts of our country. Is not good for us, obviously. And I think, we've got to a situation, I tell people this all the time, and obviously I'm speaking to you as a Republican candidate in the number one most conservative district in the entire country, Texas 13. But, during the 8 years of the Obama administration, I think one of the bad things that happened that led us to some extent where we're at right now is, everything that happened in the Obama administration, a lot of it, most of it, in my opinion, revolved around identity politics. It was, straight versus gay, black versus white, man versus woman, poor versus rich. And it created a culture where everybody kind of felt like they had to pick a side,
Right.
And we shouldn't be like that. We don't have to pick sides. We're all Americans. We should all be on the same page right now, especially when it comes to things like, like this coronavirus.
Well, Ronny, pardon me for interrupting you, but are we all Americans? I mean, I think that's part of the problem. I'm looking at the other side, and I'm saying, wait a minute, these people are Marxists.
Well, you're right. You're right about that. And there's actually a few members of Congress right now that I would make the argument that really don't want to be Americans.
Yes.
That's a shame. But I tell people all the time that's one of the reasons that I'm running for this office right now is because it sounds cliche, but for the first time, I can honestly say I'm terrified of the future that I'm going to hand to my kids and my grandkids right now.
Amen.
We've lost an entire generation of kids right now that have been brainwashed by our educational system, by our primary educational system, and even more specifically by our university system to think that, that this is not a good place to live, to not want to be Americans. Most of those kids have never been anywhere else. I've been to 120 different countries during my time in the military. I can tell you firsthand there's no better place to live than right here in the United States. But these kids have been brainwashed to think that this is a bad place to live. And they're, you can see it right now, a lot of these kids are growing up. They don't have any respect for themselves. They don't have any respect for their neighbors' property, for the flag, for the police, for the military. It's just a shame that we've gotten to this point in a lot of places, and we've got to fix it, or we're going to lose this country.
Ronny, thank you so much. We are way over our time. Our producer's having a heart attack in the other room because we're 10 minutes over break. But let me give your website. I've got Ronny Jackson for Texas13.com. And we would encourage our folks to go in if they can support you, do that. Excellent candidate. The good news is, as you said, it's a very, very conservative district. I guess the bad news is you've actually got a three-way race with a libertarian in the race as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. But we're gonna take my district, and I'm gonna work hard to keep Texas red and help the other Republican candidates out there, and we're gonna get the job done.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Keep up the great work. Do appreciate you joining us this afternoon.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.